Hey guys, Dr. Bodle here, and there's something that I wanted to share with you that I just can't say enough. You know those low thyroid symptoms that you've been dealing with? You're not crazy. Those symptoms are real. It's not because you're getting old, it's not because you're imagining things. You know your body better than anyone else. And these symptoms are things that we need to take seriously, and they're due to real changes in your physiology. So, why is it that every time you go into your doctor and explain what you're experiencing, and for some of you, you're doing that again and again and again, your doctor really isn't hearing you? They're dismissing a lot of these things, and oftentimes they're suggesting, well, maybe you should go on antidepressants and that might fix your problem. Unfortunately, the reason for this is because your doctor really doesn't understand Hashimoto's. And the way that they've been trained to approach it, and let's be honest, they haven't been trained to approach Hashimoto's, they've only been trained to approach hypothyroidism. So if someone is having thyroid symptoms, the only way that they know to confirm it is if you have an abnormal TSH. No change in TSH, then they assume can't be a thyroid problem and you must be making this stuff up. So let's discuss in this video why Hashimoto's is a little bit unique, why your doctor's take on it is, in my opinion, backwards, and why those symptoms you're having are very real, even though your doctor doesn't think they are. So real quick, just so we're all on the same page, Hashimoto's is an autoimmune thyroid condition that is defined by the presence of TPO antibodies and or TG antibodies in accordance with most commonly low thyroid symptoms, although some individuals may have intermittent bouts of hyperthyroid symptoms, and depending on when labs are checked, they may even have a more normal or standard presentation because our immune system can be unstable and at different times it will fluctuate. Therefore, whenever you get those labs done, it's going to reflect the current state of the immune system, and that isn't always reflective of the overall trend. Now, some doctors will say, yes, Hashimoto's has to have antibodies, but just because you have antibodies doesn't necessarily mean that there's anything wrong. And although there likely is a subset of the population that has antibodies but are still healthy, and depending on what research you look at, that could be anywhere between 5 and 15% of people who test with positive antibodies but don't have symptoms. I think the key differentiator there is that symptom presentation. But if you have positive antibodies and you have symptoms, well, we're approaching this as though you have Hashimoto's with a very high certainty, even if your TSH and your T4 levels still look fine. The reason why this should be the approach is because antibodies develop before changes in TSH and T4. So let me explain a little bit how that works. When we develop antibodies, those antibodies can interact with different immune cells and immune complexes, and it can lead to damage and impairment of our thyroid gland. Now, in the beginning, those changes are going to be so small that we might not notice them, and the symptoms will be very mild. However, as the condition starts to progress, the damage is going to become more and more. And just like any tissue in the body that gets damaged, there's going to be associated inflammation. Now, in those first few months and first few years, even though your thyroid gland is being damaged, for the most part, it's still relatively intact. And when needed, it's able to crank out as much T4 and as much T3 as the body needs. So the reason that people with Hashimoto's start to initially develop thyroid symptoms isn't because the gland is so damaged or atrophied that it can't produce any hormone. In fact, as I just said, those hormone levels are still normal. Instead, it's due to the ongoing damage and the inflammation that is being created, which then impairs our body's ability to utilize the hormone that's already available. So I'll say that one more time just so we're crystal clear. In the beginning stages, our thyroid gland is still mostly intact. It's still making T4 and T3, and the brain is seeing that, and therefore TSH levels are staying normal. However, even though the damage isn't super severe at this time, that damage from the immune system is still ongoing. Because of the cellular damage that's occurring, we start to develop systemic inflammation, and that impairs our body's ability to use the T4 and T3 that's available. So you might have heard me say this before, but Many times with Hashimoto's, it isn't so much an issue of a hormone quantity problem or not having enough, although that can be more of an issue for us as it continues to progress. Most of the time, Hashimoto's is a hormone utilization problem. We have enough in our system, but because of the inflammation, we can't appropriately bind it to the receptor. But when it comes down to it, whether you don't have enough hormone or you're not binding it correctly, the outcome is the same. In both scenarios, our cellular metabolism isn't properly activated, and as that system starts to slow down, we start to become symptomatic. The problem is, your doctor only recognizes one of those situations as being a problem for you. So if you do have Hashimoto's, but it isn't progressed enough to where the damage is so significant that your TSH and T4 have now changed, then they're really not going to pay much attention to it or consider it a valid reason for some of the symptoms that you're experiencing. Even in the best situations where your doctor admits something is going on, you might have heard a solution being offered up similar to, well, we just have to wait until things get worse. Then once that happens, we can start prescribing you medication. And whether your doctor is thinking that or they're saying it out loud, that typically is the path that most of them are going to end up taking. Sure, Hashimoto's might be damaging your thyroid now, but it isn't enough damage to cause that increase in TSH where they can then provide you with some sort of medication. But as you can imagine, this creates a few more problems that we have to deal with. Number one, whenever we can avoid it, we really don't want things to go untreated in our body and have some sort of condition continue to progress and get worse. I mean, if we think about it in any other situation, that'd be like, yeah, you have a hairline fracture, but we're not going to do anything about it until the bone is completely broken through. I mean, that sounds ridiculous, right? And it is ridiculous, and we would never accept it in any of those other situations. So maybe your doctor is willing to wait because they don't know what to do with things right now. But I always think if we can prevent further damage from happening, then we have a much better chance at recovering and helping our body to be more stable in the long run. The more tissue we lose, although it's not impossible, it makes it much more difficult to come back from that. Number two, as time goes by, not only is your thyroid gland getting worse, but you're in the same situation in terms of how you're feeling. We all know that thyroid symptoms can be horrible and debilitating. And for our solution to be, yeah, you might feel terrible now, but we're going to wait for things to get even worse. I mean, I can't come up with a less appealing option. For example, if you're dealing with chronic fatigue and exhaustion, your life, your interests, your partner, your kids, your work, none of that is going to wait. And if you can hardly keep up and manage things with your energy levels right now, where are we going to be if we have to wait 2 or 3 more years to come up with some sort of solution? And finally, the third problem is, even when your Hashimoto's becomes so progressed that TSH starts to increase and your doctor is finally able to give you some sort of T4 medication, it almost puts us into a similar situation that we were dealing with in the very first place. So think about it a little bit with me. When you first developed Hashimoto's, why were you having low thyroid symptoms? It wasn't because you were deficient on T4, it was because you had an autoimmune condition and the inflammation that was occurring due to the cellular damage was impairing your body's ability to use that hormone. Now, we've waited many years for it to get to the point where not only do you have a utilization problem, but you also have an amount problem. There's been so much damage to your thyroid gland that you can't produce enough T4, and your doctor has determined you have to fix that by taking a T4 replacement. So you take that medication, and if all goes well, it brings those T4 levels up and it reduces your TSH back into the normal range. Now, if this is something that's gone on for a long time and maybe you weren't getting your levels checked regularly, that T4 level could be significantly low, and adding some amount of medication could make a big difference for you. However, most people with Hashimoto's don't see a huge change, or if they do notice a change, it's relatively mild in nature, or they'll feel better for a month or two before things go back to our quote unquote normal. So why is this? It's because even though the medication fixed your quantity problem, the thyroid hormone replacement medication does nothing when it comes to managing autoimmunity. So, yes, your TSH is normal and your T4 levels have been restored, but the immune system dysfunction and the inflammation that was giving you problems so many years ago is still there. So, whether the thyroid hormone in your body is coming from natural production or it's coming from a medication, you're still not going to be able to use that hormone until you manage the inflammation. So even though you've addressed your hypothyroidism with the appropriate medication, you haven't addressed your hypothyroid symptoms or your low metabolism because we're not focusing on the right part of our physiology, which is our immune system. So if I had my druthers, when someone starts to experience a number of different hypothyroid symptoms, and especially if they have hypothyroidism in their family, my recommendation wouldn't be for them to get their TSH checked first. It would be for them to get their TPO and TG antibodies checked. As I said before, the antibodies develop first, then we get damaged, then eventually we see changes in TSH and T4. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to look at the things that changed last and use that as our primary indicator for what type of treatment we should employ. I know that wouldn't be a magic fix, but if we could slowly start to change our way of thinking when it comes to thyroid problems and Hashimoto's particularly, understanding that autoimmunity is part of the root cause, that these types of conditions progress over time, and symptoms aren't a direct reflection of those standard labs, then I think we could start to validate people's concerns, provide them with a proactive plan to start feeling better sooner rather than later, and all in all, it would be a much healthier approach for everyone. But thank you so much for sticking with me this far into the video. Hopefully everything made sense, and hopefully that gave you a little bit more understanding to how Hashimoto's works and why a lot of doctors are missing it. I don't know if this is good news or bad news, but you're now more educated than just about every practitioner out there that you're going to come in contact with. Honestly, maybe I shouldn't have said that. That might stress you out more than anything. But the good news is we're still here to help each other out. So if you do have any questions, leave them for me in the comments and I'll do my best to get back to them. If you did like the video, but you know that you need more help, then I would highly recommend signing up for my online course, Natural Hashimoto's Transformation. And you can get that process started by sending an email to contact@seattlethyroidhelp.com. This course is nothing like anything else that's available for people with Hashimoto's today. It's a combination of education and clear action steps. That way you can modify things for your specific needs, take back control of your health, and start feeling better again. My main goal is to help women with Hashimoto's who are struggling to get help from their doctor, dealing with chronic exhaustion, and feeling overwhelmed from trying to do things themselves. The course will allow you to make confident decisions when it comes to nutrition, lifestyle, and supplementation. That way you can get your energy back, understand your health, and start living your life again. The course will include 8 modules covering all of the major principles that you need to know to address your Hashimoto's, and will also have weekly live question and answer sessions and a private Facebook community. So if this is something that sounds like it might be a good fit for you, space is limited and I won't be working with everyone, so make sure to reach out. That way you don't miss this opportunity. We always start out with a free consultation. That way we can talk about your health, figure out your goals, and make sure that the course makes sense. So once you send your email, my staff will reach out to you and help you to get that set up, and I'm always looking forward to chatting with you. If you're not ready for the course, but you want to keep learning, then I'd recommend checking out some of the other videos and playlists here on my YouTube channel. You can also follow me on Instagram or Facebook for daily tips and strategies, or you can grab either one of my free downloads, which are listed in the description box below. But I love you guys, I hope you're doing well, and make sure to reach out if you have any questions or need any support. If you liked the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and also subscribe to the channel. My name is Dr. Bodle. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I will see you in the next one.